I've entitled today's message, Peace in Difficult Times. And most of us know that difficult times do come. Life can throw us a curveball sometimes, and we can face unexpected storms. And to navigate through those things can be a challenge. We are living in these days right now with COVID-19. In fact, Joel Blitt, a senior fellow at the Center for International Governance and Innovation, an economist and engineer who teaches at the University of Waterloo, says that we are living in, and I quote, the biggest human and economic catastrophe in recent history. Well, for most of us, for all of us, COVID-19 has represented challenges throughout. And perhaps maybe some of those challenges and some of those things that would want to rob you of peace are coming to the surface once again as we head into this fall season with back to school, rhythms that are going back to some sort of normal. And so maybe this has brought things to the surface for you. And so I hope today you will be able to get something from this message that would help you for today, but also in the days going forward. Let me pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you because you are the author of life. And with you there are no surprises. And so as we come into this time of year with changing elements for our children, our youth, and our own schedules, I pray that you would, by your presence, allow us to experience peace. Thank you, Lord. And I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Let me share with you the scripture for today, Matthew chapter 8, verses 23 to 27. And it's entitled, Jesus Calms the Storm. Then he got into the boat, and his disciples followed him. Without warning, a furious storm came up on the lake, so that the waves swept over the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him, saying, Lord, save us, we're going to drown. He replied, You of little faith, why are you so afraid? Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. The men were amazed and asked, What kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him. Well, this past weekend was Labor Day weekend, so a long weekend. So my wife April, who preached last Sunday, mentions, she says, I would like to go up to Tobermory. I hear beautiful things about it. And so we thought, let's go to Tobermory. It was kind of a little bit of an impulsive decision, but we decided we're going to go camping up in Tobermory. Well, we were a little surprised that it was very difficult to get a site, but we eventually found a site. And so as we're traveling up there, April's looking on her phone and suddenly exclaims, there's a severe weather warning for the Tobermory area on Bruce Peninsula. Winds up to 104 kilometers per hour. Hailstones as big as a nickel. So we were a little bit surprised, a little bit dismayed. We weren't quite too sure what to make of it, if we needed to change our plans. But of course, April, always the practical one, and I appreciate this so much about her. She looks up on her phone. She says, how high winds can a tent withstand? Well, of course, it's ridiculous when we stop and think about it, because a tent can only withstand winds of about 30 kilometers per hour, and we were expecting winds of 104 kilometers per hour. It just is representative, though, of life. Storms come in life, and often we look for a secure place. We look for a port in the storm. We look for a shelter to be able to withstand the difficulties of the storm. And so I hope today you will be able to glean some things that will help you in those times of storm. I think we need to first of all understand, though, that we must be intentional about the storm. We must be intentional about the way we go through storms. Luke chapter 1, verse 79, towards the end of the verse, it says, and it's from Zechariah's prophecy when he is overwhelmed by the news of Jesus' birth. To guide our feet into the paths of peace. To guide our feet into the paths of peace. Jesus wants to guide us into the path of peace. Now, there's two kinds of peace that we can think of. The first of which is the absence of conflict. The second of which is a peace that resides deep within us that helps us weather the difficult times, that helps us get through the difficult situations. And of course, we have those situations that would want to rob us of that peace. We have difficult situations, unexpected storms like COVID-19. We can have challenging people that would want to, or that would lead us into a place of temptation where our peace is being robbed. Or sometimes even just worry can lead us to a place whereby our peace is being robbed or is at risk of being robbed. But Jesus says in John chapter 14 verse 1, this is what he says, "Do not let your hearts be troubled." I mean, that's very intentional, isn't it? Do not let your hearts be troubled. Because the reality is that we have an intentional place and an intentional role to play in how we handle difficult situations. We must be intentional. We must have a plan. We must have some understanding of the truths of Scripture so that we can get through the difficult times. So here's the first thing that I want us to consider when it comes to being intentional about weathering the storms and finding peace in difficult times. And it's from our passage, but also other things that have been brought into them. And there are three elements. The first of which is we need to adjust our expectations. In John 16:33, it says, "You will have trouble." Now, for many of us, this is not good news, but for most of us, we realize that it is true. We will face trouble. We will have trouble in life. And we need to adjust our expectations based on that truth. That life is not going to be easy all the time. Life is going to be challenging. So these disciples are on the Sea of Galilee, and they're seasoned fishermen, but for some reason they had forgotten that the Sea of Galilee was prone to these sudden storms that would come up, and that would rage and then calm down again. And so they had forgotten this, and yet they were in the midst of this storm with Jesus in the boat. And who is Jesus? Well, Jesus is the Prince of Peace. I mean, we know that at Christmas time. We're reminded of that Jesus is the Prince of Peace. He's the ruler of peace. He's the author of peace. He is the one who knows peace and can instill it in life. But I think when we come to expectations, we need to understand that because Jesus is the Prince of Peace does not mean that he is the Prince of Convenience, or the Prince of Ease, or the Prince of my way, or my preferences, or the Prince of my comfort. He is not the Prince of those things. He is the Prince of Peace in the midst of those difficulties. And so when we need to stop, we need to adjust our expectations. Stephen Furtick says, "If I am to experience peace, I must surrender my expectation of perfection. I must learn to be content with what I am." It's so fascinating because as we look at the scripture in Matthew chapter 8 and we go back a few verses, we see this exchange with people in Jesus, and it's basically about the fact that life following Jesus is challenging. It's hard. It's not about a nice, comfortable life. It's not about being comfortable. Jesus uses the words, doesn't have a comfortable place to lay his head. So life is difficult. We see that in this passage as well as the preceding passage. This idea of the American dream is not a biblical idea. In fact, if we spend any time looking into Scripture, we realize that life for Jesus and life for us as followers of Jesus is not a promise of an easy life. See, Jesus had these disciples, and they did a lot of following Jesus into this path. And so we too are going to follow Jesus, and we must make sure that we understand that the expectations are not always easy. And the Bible consistently talks about suffering, about hardship, about pain, about vulnerability. This is the walk of the follower of Jesus. So we must learn to manage our expectations of trouble. We will have trouble. It's clear in Scripture. The second thing that I think we need to understand is the presence of Jesus for these disciples was key. Now, Jesus is the epitome of peace. So we have this raging storm all around this boat, a boat that probably is only about maybe 25 to 30 feet long, a fishing boat. So maybe the length of a car and a half to 2 cars. And the waves are crashing in over this boat. And there's water coming into the boat. It's rocking back and forth. The wind is raging. And Jesus is at peace. Jesus is sleeping. This is the idea of peace, isn't it? When we look at a little baby in a crib, we see this picture of peace. And Jesus is sleeping and is at peace in the midst of the storm. Well, that tells me that Jesus is at peace in any situation. One of the things about difficult times is we want to have comfort. I mean, when you're going through a difficulty in the hospital, you want to have somebody with you, which has been especially challenging during these days. You want to have somebody with you. When you're grieving something or someone, having somebody with you is key. It makes all the difference. And so being with Jesus makes all the difference. Do you cultivate that presence of being with Jesus? Realizing that He is the author of peace, realizing that He is bigger than any situation. The disciples experienced this as their journey progressed with Jesus. And the presence of being with Jesus was wonderful and gave them security. And in fact, there's an exchange in John chapter 6. And there's disciples that are deserting Jesus. And so Jesus says, well, are you guys going to go too? And they say, Lord, to whom shall we go? With Jesus meant everything. And for us too, it can mean everything to be with Jesus in terms of weathering the difficulties in life. We are assured of His presence throughout Scripture. Hebrews 13 verse 5 says, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. Matthew 28 verse 20, when Jesus is giving the Great Commission to go and make disciples, He says, and surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. With Jesus in our boat, the destination that He has designed for us, we will get there. He will get us there. We've been reading through the book of Acts, myself and a group of others, and we see in Scripture this idea that the Holy Spirit's presence is with us. And when we can identify that very closely with Jesus, we realize that He is with us. Jesus is with us. And this is what it says in Acts chapter 10, verse 36. You know the message God sent to the people of Israel, telling the good news of peace through Jesus Christ, who is Lord of all. Jesus is Lord of all. Jesus, His peace is bigger than any challenge. We see this promise in Scripture. A little while ago, I was at home and April had gone out for a little while, and in this time, in this particular afternoon and evening, I just had these really deep feelings of missing April. These are not everyday feelings for me. Life goes on well. We spend a lot of time together, and it's wonderful. But during this time, I don't think it was even that long of an absence. It might have been a couple of hours, and she was not with me. And I had this feeling of missing her, and your mind goes crazy sometimes. What if something happens to her? And I had this sense of that life would be very different without her. And God wants us to experience that same connection with Jesus, that we know that life would be very different without him, and that we can't escape that life is wonderful with him close by, interacting with him, sharing with him, listening with him, experiencing the challenges, the difficulties, the sadnesses, the joys of life in his presence. Isaiah 26 verse 3 says, "You will keep in perfect peace all who trust in you, all whose thoughts are fixed on you." That's beautiful, isn't it? To have that fixing of our thoughts on Jesus. So as we fix our thoughts on Jesus, we are aware of his presence in our lives, and we can go through these difficulties. We can cultivate the presence of God in our lives, talking with him and sharing with him. The third thing that can help us to experience peace in times of trouble is to focus on the destination. I mean, this principle of focusing on the destination is so true of all of life. In fact, in your driving courses, very often they will tell you, focus on where you want to go. Focus on the spot in the road or the spot in the curve that you want to go, to focus to the destination. And so when we look at this passage and we see that Jesus wakes up when he is roused by the disciples and calms the storm, and they get to the other side, we can lose sight of the fact that our objective is to get to the other side of the difficulty, to get to the other side of the trouble that we are in, the storm that we are in. And yet, this would not be the truth of this passage. The truth of this passage is about trusting in Jesus. Trusting in Jesus for this earth, the storms that we experience, but also trusting him into the next. In fact, I think that in life, we often don't think far enough. We don't look far enough ahead in terms of wanting to get through the difficult times. We just think through to the other side of the conflict. We think through the other side of the storm, the other side of the trouble. But really, what Jesus wants to consider is he wants to bring us to the other side of life. He wants to bring us to eternity with him. I sometimes think that we don't talk enough about heaven. We talk about heaven when we are wanting to encourage and bring comfort to those who have lost a loved one, or maybe those that are in sickness and expecting death. We talk about heaven at those times. But I wonder if our lives would be different if we looked at it in light of eternity. That this life, the suffering, the challenges, they pale in comparison to what awaits us. In fact, in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2, it says, "For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of God." John 15 also reminds us, it says, "In this world you will have trouble, but I have overcome the world." The world is but a portion of the life that we can experience. The world is just a small segment of what we can experience in the context of eternity. So when we think of the challenges in life, we must always think of the end goal. The end goal is not to get to the other side of the conflict, but rather the end goal is to get to eternity, to be with Jesus. In Acts, as we read through Acts, we read about this this talk of the resurrection. In fact, if you go through Acts and you look at often the messages that are being shared, whether it's to individuals or to groups of people, it often talks about the resurrection of Jesus. And maybe some of that was about the proximity that they were in relation to the resurrection of Jesus just a few years before. Although, I mean, it spanned a number of years. So it may have been a few months after Jesus' resurrection and ascension, but it also spanned a number of years. The missionary journeys of Peter and Paul, and they talked about the resurrection. Why don't we talk about the resurrection all year? Not just at Easter time, but all year. Because if we are reminded of this idea of the resurrection, this life here is in context. This life here is not everything. This life is only but a portion of what we can look forward to. Our lives as followers of Jesus can only make sense in light of the resurrection. We must focus on eternity, on heaven. This week I have been thinking a lot of the Trainer family, a family that has been devastated by a tragic event, whereby members of the family, 4 members of the family, were shot and killed, and a 5th member was shot and wounded. And so we have this family, Chris and Loretta Trainer. And Chris, the dad, was killed, and 3 of the children as well, Bradley, Adeline, and Joseph. And Sam, a student who was away at university, was spared, and also Loretta, the mom, was shot, but she survived. Can you imagine the grief that this family is experiencing? And the question that I have, does anything about this have any hope apart from the resurrection of Jesus? Apart from the fact that these can look forward to being together in eternity? Is there any hope apart from the resurrection of Jesus? And in our own lives, is there any hope apart from the resurrection of Jesus Christ? At the beginning, I talked a little bit about being intentional. When we're face to face with difficult situations, when we're face to face with these challenges that we face in life, the storms of life, sometimes it's a little too late to develop coping strategies. Sometimes it's a little bit too late to know and to have experienced the path of peace. Not just peace as a destination, but the path of peace. And so we must take these opportunities that we face, whether it is the stresses and the anxieties that come along with going back to school and sending our kids off to an uncertain place. And yet, we must stop and think, and we must practice the presence of Jesus in our lives. We must practice managing our expectations, and we must practice living in the context of eternity today. Well, here's a little tool that you might use that would help you in terms of practicing peace during difficult times, living and experiencing peace during difficult times. So I want you to try this with me. You could be sitting down where you are, or if you choose to, you can stand up. It's either way. You can do it in your car if you're listening to this in your car, anywhere that you might find yourself. So first of all, take your fists, make fists with them, and cross them over your chest. And this will represent the fact that we often want to control life. We often take the situations that have gotten away on us, and we want to bring them back into our control. We want to bring them back so that we can manage them. And this is faulty strategy. It's not the right way to approach it. And so we've talked a little bit about the fact that we need to manage our expectations. So in an act of letting go of your expectations of control, I would invite you to release your fists and to open up your posture. It's less control. You don't have the control anymore. Then I want you to take your hands and to open them to Jesus. Open them out to Jesus and to God. Because He has control of life. He is bigger than any storm. And as we give Him control of our lives, He manages it for us. He brings us the strength that we need to get through the difficult times. And then the third part of this exercise is raise your hands towards heaven and your eyes towards heaven, looking to Jesus, looking to heaven as your final destination. And as you think about that, realize that this life is in its proper context. So I would invite you to practice that at one point, to let go of your expectations, to give control over to Jesus, and to look to eternity and to Jesus. I pray that this message has been helpful to you today, and that you will practice, that you will be intentional about developing the strategy that will allow you to experience peace in difficult times.